Good evening, and welcome to the September 15th, 2009 meeting of the Glendale City Council. We have returned from a closed session matter. I would, at this point, entertain a motion to adjourn the closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please? Or do we need a roll call?
No.
Okay.
No objections.
In that case,
We're just adjourned.
in that case, Mr. City Clerk,
We'll consider that meeting
call for
adjourned.
the City Council meeting.
Certainly. Council members Draymond?
Here.
Najarian? Mayor Quintero? Weaver?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman?
Here. Tonight's flag salute is going to be led by our City Manager, Jim Starbird.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Please rise, place your hand over your heart, and join me in the pledge to our nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation.
Tonight's invocation will be led by the Reverend Al Garciazo from the Glendale Adventist Medical Center.
Let us pray. Dear God, we come before you with reverence and awe, recognizing that you are the source of every blessing. We thank you for the way that you have guided our city and the blessings that you have bestowed upon us. We appreciate our civil and religious liberties. As we gather here tonight, we reflect upon the terrible events of September 11, 2001, and lift the victims and their families in our prayers. Continue to grant them peace, hope, and understanding. We also pray for the safety of the members of our armed forces who work every day to keep our nation safe, protect them, and watch over them. Now please direct our city leaders as they engage in the business of the day. May the decisions that are made reflect your love and goodness. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Mr. City Clerk, can we have your report?
Certainly. The agenda for the September 15, 2009 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, September 10, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. What is next, please?
Next is presentations and appointments. And 3A is agenda preview for the meeting of September 22, 2009.
We'll go to Yasmin Beers.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, there are no business agenda items for the Glendale Housing Authority for September 22nd. For the Glendale Redevelopment Agency at 2:30, we have 216 South Brand Boulevard, letter of intent between the agency and Museum of Neon Art. For a joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, we have two items on the agenda. One is Directors of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services and the Director of Development Services regarding construction progress of the Glendale Adult Recreation Center. And secondly, Directors of Glendale, again, Parks, Recreation, and Community Services and Development Services regarding status report of the proposed water playground projects at Maple Park and Griffith Manor Park. For the evening meeting, City Council at 6 p.m., we have a number of consent items. General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, painting of street light standards on various city streets. The Fire Chief, replacement of Fire Division breathing apparatus. Acting Chief of Police, Wellness Consultant for the Police Department. Acting Chief of Police, State of California Office of Traffic Safety Next Generation Click It or Ticket Grant. Under adoption of ordinances, ordinance regarding the Teton Hydropower Project Power Sales and Acquisition Project. Interim urgency ordinance placing a moratorium on the establishment of medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of Glendale. We have a number of action items that evening. City Manager regarding departmental organizational changes. Director of Development Services, a proposed terms for a ground lease agreement. General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, furnish labor and equipment and materials to locate and mark underground electrical utility facilities within the city limits of the city of Glendale. And lastly, Director of Planning, proposed residential window replacement draft design guidelines and possible enforcement options for properties with replacement windows installed without a permit. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. City Clerk, what is next on the agenda?
Next is recognition of merchants for fire assistance at
Thank you.
3B.
Tonight, it's my honor to be presenting 7 commendations to 7 local businesses, all of whom donated services and products during the station fire to our emergency responders. I'm going to call them each individually, but each of the commendations has the same wording. which is that on behalf of the City Council and the entire Glendale community, I commend your outstanding civic leadership during the station fire. Your donation to our emergency services providers contributed to their well-being and allowed them to assist in saving lives and property during this catastrophic event. And it's signed Frank Quintero, Mayor, September 15, 2009. We're going to ask these representatives to come up one at a time. The first one is to be presented to the Americana at Brand, and I will ask Councilman Najarian to present this to, I believe, Rick Lemo.
Congratulations, Mr. Lemo.
Thank you, Councilmember.
You may address council.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. On behalf of Rick Caruso, our CEO, and Jackie Levy, who is our General Manager of the Americana brand, you should know how proud and privileged we feel to have an opportunity to show our appreciation to the emergency services folks. And even though sometimes the word seems a little hollow, we want to make sure that they know we appreciate everything they do all year long, but especially during the recent fires. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next is to Barney's Beanery Restaurant, represented by Jessica Rodriguez. Is she here? Okay, come on up. And Councilman Weaver will be presenting you with the commendation.
Did they open a Glendale branch?
Did they?
Where is a... You want to tell?
Just one on Sunset.
It's in. We have a lot. There's the newest one's in Burbank, which is where we cooked all the food out of. It's on First Street, right near the AMC Theater, and it's almost a year old now. If you like football, come check it out. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Next is Glendale's own Damon Steakhouse, and Patrick Campbell and Councilman Draymond will be giving you the commendation.
Patrick, thank you, and congratulations on receiving this. Damon's continues to be a great part of our larger community. Please say a few words.
Thank you. Actually, as an evacuee and someone who helped, I just can't say enough about the city and what you guys have done from top to bottom. So thank you all very much. It was, seriously, you deserve one of these cute little things.
Thank you. The next business to be recognized is Everest Burger, represented by Dino Bicos. Welcome.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. We love your food.
Thank you very much. It really was the least we could have done. The firefighters did the hard work, and they support us all year round in our business. And if we can help in the future, we will do it.
You recall how many burritos you made? Had to be hundreds and hundreds.
The first day was 120, and the second day was 120. But in addition, we helped the police department also the following 5 days.
Very nice. We saw your burritos all over the foothills.
Thank you very much. Next would be Ralph's Market and Ron Shundo to be accepting, and I will be happy to give you the commendation. Congratulations. Thank you.
Just on behalf of Rouse Market and the 4 locations in Glendale, we do look to help as many people as possible in something like we just saw. And by all means, if somebody could let us know if we could help at any other given time in such a need, then we'll step forward. And my location's at 1010 North Glendale. Thank you.
Thanks. I know Ralph's has given a lot back to the community, so thank you. And next is the Olive Garden Restaurant in Eliza Lagoya for Steve Crum. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just in the name of Darden Restaurants. really make us proud to be part of the community that really helps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least is Walgreens Pharmacy, Ms. Corey Evans for Bud Heitman.
Thank you very much. That's for you on behalf of Walgreens. A long way from the day there was a Mr. Walgreens who actually talked to customers on the phone.
That's right. Thank you. I'm at the store right at the edge of Burbank and Glendale. We're not in Glendale yet, but we're trying. But we consider it a privilege to help out in the community, and we hope that you'll feel free to call us anytime we can. Thank you.
Thanks. And again, I want to thank all of the businesses and everybody who helped and pulled together and helped our emergency responders and really came forward to the community. So thank you all. Next, we have council comments. Do I have any comments from the dais?
I think you're doing a fine job.
Oh, thank you. You don't think I'm doing a fine job?
Well, Madam Mayor, I will say one thing. Congratulations to USC and UCLA in their 2 victories down south in the Midwest. They're great victories in front of over 100,000 for each game.
Thanks. And I have just one comment, which is that there were a lot of really wonderful civic events this weekend, but the penultimate event in my mind was the very large gala fundraiser that Pat the Chief held at the Americana on Saturday night. They had opened it up to about 300 people, thinking they'd get about 150, and they turned away about 200 people. So next year they're going to expand the fundraiser, and all of the money goes to providing services to the homeless in Glendale. So it was a wonderful event for a wonderful cause, and I want to thank Nick Lamb and the rest of the board, Pat the Chief, and everyone who participated. Next we have our consent items. Mr. Clerk?
Yes, following as consent items, item number 5 on the agenda, including minutes, following a routine and may be acted upon by one motion. A member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such requests before motions are proposed.
Thank you.
You have no cards?
Not for the consent items.
Okay. Move the consent calendar.
I'm sorry. Can we please pull 5B? I have one comment for 5B.
I'll move the remainder of the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a roll call.
Council members Raymond?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero? Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman.
Yes. Can you please read 5B into the record?
Acting Director of Community Development and Housing regarding recommendation to approve an appropriation of CDBG funds for the Homeland Youth Center Rehabilitation Project. At B1 is a resolution appropriating $137,944.
Thank you. I have one card. Margaret Hammond.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff, and the audience and people in TV land. My name is Margaret Hammond. I haven't been around lately. A few things have happened, one after the other, that have kept me away. But I do have to address this, which I have spoken about this appropriation of the CDBG funds to a private rehabilitation project. Those funds were to be used for the good of thousands of people in the way of pool that we are waiting to get enough funds to have replaced the pool that was taken away. And also our roads are in horrendous shape. And we need to keep every dollar. We keep saying we don't have any money. We haven't got the money to fix the roads or to do this or to do that. And this money, I understood from the CDBG, was to go. That's what it's supposed to go to. Areas that need a lot of work and will benefit hundreds of thousands of people. Like Glendale Avenue is horrendous. The roads, streets, I mean, all over the place. We're looking at, and there's been talk about it. If it's left go another 3 years, it's going to be almost beyond just a normal replacement. I mean, repair. It's going to be big-time replacement. So I do feel that the money is not being used the way that it should be, and I will keep saying this. I've said it before, and I am saying it again. And thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any response from any of the council members? Mr. Najarian.
I just want to say, Margaret, that I think this amount of money to Minutemen is a very good use. Many times I've heard you come up and complain about youth doing inappropriate things, either they're speeding or they're smoking or many things you've brought to our attention. And I know that the Home Minutemen organization does their very best to change that behavior and keep the kids away from those sort of activities by directing them into healthy activities such as basketball, soccer, other events as that. And this money is going towards their new Glendale location on just off San Fernando Road. So although it's not fixing potholes in the streets, I think it maybe is going to a better use by helping our youth become and maintain better citizens and to act appropriately so our next generation can make us all proud.
Thank you. And I will just ask either the city attorney or city manager whether this is technically a misuse of CDBG funds.
Well, let me answer. No, it isn't. No, it is not an inappropriate use. It is an appropriate use of CDBG funds. It seems that just about everybody who has their own view on what CDBG funds should be used for thinks every other purpose isn't appropriate. Actually, CDBG funds can be utilized in the appropriate areas defined by HUD for either public infrastructure projects like streets, roads, medians, or for private capital improvements. This arose out of stimulus funds and the Community Development Commission making a recommendation to fund this project, which after the fact we learned would not really be eligible for the stimulus money, but is eligible for CDBG funds. With that, you approved placing all of the stimulus money in the Garfield neighborhood project, which is street improvements, infrastructure improvements, and then shifting a piece of the non-stimulus CDBG funds into this project so you could meet the recommendation of the committee, both uses of which are very appropriate under HUD guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a roll call, please.
Council members Freeman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero. Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman.
Yes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is oral communications. And as is our custom, the first round of oral communications are those being used for public announcements. First is Christine Harmon.
Hello, good evening, council members and community members. I'm Christine Harmon, and I'm here representing the Montrose Verdugo City Chamber of Commerce, which has been promoting business in this area since 1923. And I'm here to invite you all to Oktoberfest. This is the 32nd Oktoberfest. It will be Saturday, October 3rd. And I know some people weren't sure if we were having it or not. Well, we're on, that's for sure. Now, a couple things going on with it that I think you'll be glad to hear is that while the economy's been rough, the chamber, as well as all the chambers in Glendale, I'm sure, have been working really hard to promote local businesses. Oktoberfest, we will be certainly doing that. Oktoberfest will be great. If you've not been to it before, although I'm sure many of you have, there will be entertainment, there will be contests, and it would be great to see any of you joining the hot dog eating contest. There'll be games, there'll be beer, bratwurst, brownies, strudel. It'll be a good time for everybody and lots of food to eat. And in promoting business, if someone doesn't care for German food, there's lots of restaurants, as it is held on Honolulu, as it is every year. So there will be other choices if people can't decide. And we are also very proud that the bulk of all the foods and services being purchased and provided at this event are from local businesses in Glendale. And we will also have a big screen TV available, so no one has to stay home to miss the UCLA or the USC game. So there will be college football shown all day. So we invite the community to come and to have a great time. This is a large fundraiser for the chamber, and we promote businesses with the money we raise. Now, in promoting our Oktoberfest sponsorships, which help us put this on, you may have noticed that this week in the Glendale News Press was the beginning of advertisements. These will continue through the actual day of Oktoberfest. And we will have sponsor banners at the event as well. The sponsors are usually local businesses. One thing we have done differently this year, because the economy being what it is that we have expanded our advertising outside of just local. Next Wednesday, the 23rd, we will be having in the Los Angeles Times an insert which will look very much like the poster. I do have a poster for you of it. That will go out in 31 different zip codes around Los Angeles. And that will be Pasadena, it will be Winnetka, it will be Valley Village, North Hollywood. We are trying to bring in other people to come to our city to see our great event, how nice we all are, what great businesses we have, and then hopefully they'll say, hey, this is a neat place, I'm going to come back. So that's what we're hoping. They come back again and shop and dine. Thank you.
In the nick of time.
Looks like this. And the sponsors are listed along the bottom, so it's providing a lot of good exposure for businesses that wish to sponsor. Okay, so so you don't forget, mark your calendar. October 3rd is Oktoberfest, okay? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's always a very well-attended event that's a lot of fun.
There's some chamber directories, please.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
And you have to wear that wig, I think, between now and October. Isn't that the way that
Just
usually
October
works?
3rd.
Okay, great. Next we have Leon Mayer. Mr. Mayer.
Good evening, Acting Mayor Friedman, members of the council and staff. My name is Leon Mayer, and I'm here tonight to talk about two things. First of all, One Book, One Glendale is actually starting. We're having a preview on that by Colin Ledgerton, who will talk about his book this coming Thursday. The book is Invisible China, the story of the China borderlands. He actually took a 14,000-mile trip after he graduated from Tufts University. He spoke fluent Uyghur, which is the language of 10 million Muslim people who live in Western China. And he took pictures with his friends. He wrote a book. He's going to give a lecture and also show slides this Thursday, 7 o'clock at the Central Library. And I can't say too much about the author. He's local, born, raised in Glendale. His father, Vic Ledgerton, has contributed through the Duck Splash hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 3 or 4 years for community events. And so that's this Thursday, 7 o'clock, Central Library Auditorium. Now, we also have another, before I go into the One Book, One Glendale, which I'd like to do for a minute or two, we have an event I'll be talking more about next Tuesday, but it's almost upon us as well. And this is an event that's going to be presented on September 29th. That's a Tuesday. It'll be a week from next Tuesday. And the name of the book is The Children of Armenia. The author is Michael Bolobian. And this book is about a subject we all know about and heard about it, but it's a little different tact or different aspect to it that should be of interest to you. And the person who we think lends importance to the book is the fact that former governor of the state of California, George Deukmejian, he was the 35th governor of California. He spoke highly about the book, and he spoke strongly and passionately about the reasons for such a book being published and read by the public. So that is on the 29th of September. And incidentally, most of the recent events, and we're not in conflict with the Oktoberfest of Montrose, but if you look at City Views, page 13, everybody gets City Views, you'll see all the One Book, One Glendale events that you should consider going to, coming, buying the books, talking to the authors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Clerk, will you please read the next item?
Next item under 7, adoption of ordinances, is 7A, ordinance providing for a salary supplement and continuation of certain benefits for city employees who are members of the National Guard or Armed Forces Reserves and are called to active duty. This was offered on September 8, 2009 by Councilmember Weaver.
Madam Mayor, move 7A.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmembers Draymond,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero, Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman.
Yes. Could you please read us our first action item?
Action item 8A is City Attorney regarding proclamation of local emergency due to the station fire. At 8A1 is a resolution terminating the local emergency.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman, this is a recommendation to adopt a resolution terminating the declaration of local emergency as a result of the station fire. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, do I need to read the resolution?
You do not. The resolution is part of the packet. I'll just add to what Mr. Starbird noted, that under state law, there was a proclamation of local emergency as a result of a horrendous station fire. Once that proclamation is designated by a Director of Emergency Services, Mr. Starbird, the proclamation was then ratified by the City Council, and within 14 days, the City Council needs to consider if the conditions that require the emergency still exist, and if not, to terminate the proclamation of local emergency. It's our recommendation, as Mr. Starbird noted, that we can successfully and appropriately terminate it at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, move 8A1.
Second.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Councilmembers Draymond,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero, Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman.
Yes, thank you. Mr. City Clerk, what is next?
And Mayor, at 8B is Acting Chief of Police regarding discussion regarding the adoption of moratorium prohibiting the establishment of medical marijuana dispensaries. B1 is an urgency ordinance for introduction.
Thank you. Can we have your report, please, Mr. City Manager?
I'll go to, actually, it looks like I'll go to Michael Garcia, City Attorney's Office.
Sure. Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, I'll just briefly introduce the item, the moratorium. Before you is a moratorium to ban or temporarily ban or prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries within city limits. This is in response to the Compassionate Use Act, which was adopted in 2005. A number of jurisdictions throughout the state have adopted either bans or moratoria to prohibit their use. The purpose for the moratorium is to prohibit any potential medical marijuana dispensary from coming into the city, while the city analyzes whether to ban them outright or to impose some regulations on them. That's a policy call of the City Council, and the first step is just to introduce this ordinance to ban them within city limits.
Okay.
And I should say Captain Nicolaisen is here to also address any particular questions you might have with respect to the legalization aspects of medical marijuana within the state.
But just to clarify, we're adopting a moratorium tonight to give the City Council more time to look at the implications of either banning or allowing the medical marijuana dispensaries. So we're not making that decision tonight. Tonight is only a decision for a temporary moratorium so that we can have that further discussion. Mr. City Manager.
Mayor Pro Tem, it might be useful to have Mr. Garcia quickly comment on the timing of the moratorium. There's this initial study period and then the next steps that would follow.
Absolutely. The first step tonight, obviously, is to introduce the ordinance. Next week would be to adopt the ordinance. That ordinance would be in effect for 45 days. During that period, the city staff will be studying the issues that are out there and bringing back a recommendation either to, and based obviously on the council comments and direction, bring back an ordinance either to extend the moratorium, if that's the council's desire, or some other direction that the council so provides. It's really within the discretion of the council at that point. But the statutory requirements for moratorium are that we have to bring it back to you within 45 days to either extend it or allow it to terminate.
Okay. Do we have any questions for City Attorney? Yes, Mr. Najarian.
I have some questions. I understand that staff will be coming back should the ordinance be introduced today and after the ordinance adopting the moratorium is voted on and approved. and perhaps the police department can help us with this. And it's the whole line of questioning as to what actually happens in and around those marijuana dispensaries. For instance, are the drugs sold out the back door to people that don't have prescriptions? Are prescriptions forged? And I'm using the word prescriptions very loosely because I understand that they're not prescriptions. It's simply a recommendation by a question by whom? Is it a medical doctor, an osteopath, a psychologist? Who actually has the authority to write these? Are the drugs in other communities finding their way to school children? Is it being resold? Is it finding its way to other adults within the community? What actually is going on in and around these? I've read some newspaper articles and had some secondhand information. How are they supplied? Are we going to, have a drug runner careening down from Northern California, skidding across? I made it. I'm on my home. I'm safe. I'm at home. So, if you could enlighten us on this sort of behavior, the bad things that accompany this. At the root of this, I think, I don't know which administration permitted it, was the intent that marijuana is a drug, that it can be helpful to some people with certain types of illnesses, sometimes fatal illnesses, but I think it's spun out of control due to different reasons. And if you could give us some information on that when it comes time for us to make that decision, that would be very helpful.
We will do that. As the staff report noted, there's a comprehensive report that police chiefs throughout the state have already prepared on some of the negative secondary impacts associated with dispensaries, and that report was provided as part of the record. Obviously, when we come back to you after the 45 days, that's information that can be provided to you, as well as a detailed account of the procedure for getting one of these identification cards and some of the problems that law enforcement has seen as the dispensaries have been regulated in certain cities.
Thank you. Before I ask for a public comment, and if there's anybody else from the public who wishes to speak, please turn in your card at this time for 8B. I'm just going to remind the speaker and the council that we're not tonight looking at debating whether or not we're going to prohibit or allow these dispensaries. We're only having a moratorium so that staff can prepare the report as the city attorney just explained, and we will have a fuller discussion at that point. My only card for now is Randy Lamas. Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I've been trying to get zoning permits in the city of Glendale for a few years now, and the only thing they've told me is they don't zone it or allow it. I think you guys should go by what California set for guidelines under SB 420, 1,000 feet from schools, daycares, churches, and go about it from what California has voted for the patients that really need it. And not set a moratorium, maybe just set guidelines for the city and through the doctor's offices. That's how the recommendations are acquired, through real doctors, not through whatever. It's through actual doctors. And I think from the people's standpoint, that's where this should go. Not into moratorium or banning, or you should just monitor it and reap the benefits of all the good it has to do for the patients that really need it.
Okay.
And that's all I had to say.
Okay. Thank you very much. And at the end of the moratorium, that's when we'll have a further discussion about whether this is a use that we want to have permitted. Mr. City Attorney.
And in addition to that, Madam Mayor, members of council, those comments are well taken. Certainly, as part of the initial report we come back with, and the council were to extend the moratorium even further work would be done on providing you with information involving the state guidelines, the medical marijuana program enacted by the state legislation a couple of years ago to implement the Compassionate Use Act, and all of the issues, both those that have been studied previously, whether it be the secondary effects, the negative impacts that law enforcement has seen, the positive impacts that others may have written about. The good news is Glendale is not at the forefront of this issue. This issue has started back in the 90s when the Compassionate Use Act was enacted by the people, and litigation has been evolving, and the contours have been being established by the courts, even as we speak, as well as the continuing study. So I think we will be able to provide you and members of the public with a significant amount of information to enable you to have a very detailed and in-depth discussion as to where you may want to go with medical marijuana dispensaries.
Okay, thank you. So, is there any further discussion from the dais? I have a motion, please.
No, it's a motion.
Ordinance.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to introduce the urgency ordinance at 8B1.
Thank you.
Mr. City Clerk, what's next?
At 8C is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding lease agreement for the lease of a portion of the city-owned property located at 900 North Glendale Avenue. At C1 is a resolution authorizing the execution of a lease agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Steiger.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman, members of the Glendale City Council. The city, through GWP, owns property at 900 North Glendale Avenue. It's part of the Verdugo Metro pumping station property and is paved and striped for parking. We've had in the past a lease agreement with adjacent property owners for use as parking, and the lease that we had in place expired in 2007. We've been leasing it on a month-to-month basis since that time, and we'd like to reinstitute a longer-term lease at this point for $1,500 per month.
Are there any questions?
I'll move it.
Second. Which one? You're moving 8C1?
Yes.
That's an ordinance for introduction.
No.
The agenda has an ordinance, but it's only necessary to be a resolution, so it is a resolution for adoption.
Okay, you're moving the resolution?
Okay.
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Council members Raymond,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero, Weaver,
Dave.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman.
Yes. Thank you. What is our next item?
At D is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding Titan Hydropower Project Power Sales and Acquisition Contract with the Southern California Public Power Authority. At D1 is an ordinance for introduction approving the city entering into the Titan Hydropower Project Power Sales and Acquisition Contract, and at D2 is a resolution authorizing city officials to execute the contract.
Thank you. Welcome back, Mr. Steiger.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman, members of the Glendale City Council. I'm pleased to bring to you tonight a renewable project that will enhance our renewable portfolio. Prior to going into the details, I'd like to preface this discussion with some recent events that are relevant to this particular item. This afternoon, Governor Schwarzenegger issued an executive order mandating a 33% renewable portfolio standard throughout the state. In this case, not only does it include all investor-owned utilities, but also all municipally owned utilities, such as GWP. This means that we will be mandated, and we agree with this, to provide 33% of all of our power as renewable by the year 2020. That in and of itself is not earth-shaking in that we expected that. What is significant is that over the last few weeks there's been significant discussions and maneuvering at the state level, the state legislative level, on a number of bills both in the Senate and the Assembly that would have not only mandated the 33%, but also limited the amount of renewable energy that could be imported into the state. Two bills were passed late Friday night, one in the Senate and one in the Assembly, that would have done that very thing. Had they not been, or will they will be vetoed by the governor, had that not occurred, we would have been significantly harmed by this potential legislation, in that we have a significant amount of our energy currently being imported, as you're well aware, from out-of-state areas such as Oregon and Washington. According to the executive order that was put in place this afternoon, there is no limitation to imported power, and that's very, very helpful to us and to our other municipal brothers and sisters within the SCAPA and the CMUA organizations. We rely significantly on imported renewable power. So I wanted to bring you up to date on that. It's significant for us. It's important to understand what is going on in the state. And even though the governor has overridden the legislation, it was sobering to see how far this legislation went.
Mr. Steiger, it's my understanding that a subsequent governor could reverse that decision or that veto or amendment to that legislation. So how concerned are you that a subsequent governor might do that, and should we be making preparations for that by perhaps trying to find renewables within the state?
We will, and that's a very good question. The answer is yes, that is very possible, that after 2010 that the existing order could be negated. So yes, we are preparing now to assure that anything we put in place will remain in place as renewable. So anything we bring to you will be with that in mind. At the same time, we've been working diligently for quite some time to provide for additional in-state transmission that will allow us to access renewable energy from various parts of the state. Significantly, for example, in the Imperial Valley, there is large potential renewables in the form of geothermal and solar. We fully expect to try to develop some of that over time, but the issue there is the building of transmission. So yes, we are looking at all avenues, but we are very, very concerned that anything we bring to you at this point is grandfathered within our existing renewable portfolio.
Okay, so presumably there would be a grandfathering clause. It wouldn't just all of a sudden, if the legislation changed, they wouldn't expect us to have all of that renewable portfolio be within state?
Yes, in fact, even in the legislation that was passed late Friday night, that grandfathering clause was included, yes.
Do you have a comment, Mr. Starbuck?
I was going to ask Glenn, it would seem that renewables benefit the community receiving it, but also the environment broadly. What's the argument for somehow restricting projects to just California?
Keeping jobs within the state, which is an admirable argument, but not realistic given where the renewables are. Not all of it is within the state, and given our transmission situation, which is very, very critical, it's not reasonable to expect to get 100% of renewables within California.
Okay.
So I'd like to introduce Steve Linz, our Assistant General Manager of Power Supply.
Madam Mayor, members of council, once again, Steve Linz, Assistant General Manager of Supply for GWP. Now we'll move on to the project, and you should all be familiar with the Tieton Hydropower Project.
We should probably ask, do you want to report on this item, or do you want to have Steve respond to questions you might have?
I know you spent 2 or 3 hours preparing a report, but...
Power plant, hydro, out of state.
Purchasing the entire project instead of just the output. The big benefit is after the bonds are paid off, you get the output at just an O&M cost, which is very efficient and cost-effective.
Of course, we're doing this in tandem with our partners with SCAPA.
Small hydro counts as renewable,
right?
As opposed to that terrible rule about big hydro.
Correct.
But anyway,
this counts. It's 1.2% of our RPS.
So we understand.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'd like to move 8D1.
Second.
We have an ordinance for introduction and a resolution.
I'm sorry. Falling asleep. I'll introduce.
Thank you.
Let's look at the next one and move 8C2.
8D2. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero? Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman?
Yes.
Sorry, my agenda's all messed up. I don't have the same one he does.
Okay, and what's next on the agenda, please?
9 under hearings is 9A Director of Planning regarding Glendale Register of Historic Resources listing for the property at 1758 Rohr Street. At 9A1 is a resolution designating the property as a historic resource.
Thank you. Mr. Platt or Mr. Hagani?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Jay Platt is available to either give a presentation or answer any questions you may have about this item and the following item.
Well, why don't we go ahead and show the presentation so that the folks at home can see this
Can
spectacular...
I ask one question?
Yes.
Oh, it's a public hearing?
It's a hearing.
Was it open?
Should open the public
Yeah,
hearing.
we'll open the public hearing.
Okay, the question I have, this house, I was 32 years old when this house was built, and it's considered historic.
Let's first, why don't we have Mr. Platt give us the presentation first, and then we'll go to questions
Let me
from...
finish my question. I'm trying to understand the rules we operate under when we consider this a historic house. I know what you're going to show us, pictures and everything. Like I said, I was 32. If that's historic, then I'm ancient. I understand the criteria that it is. It's very unique. But we've never turned down one that's been nominated that I can ever remember. But there are tax advantages to having your house made historic. Now, couldn't someone, sometime, someday, take advantage of that, get a designation solely for the purpose of getting the tax advantages? Is that taken into account by staff?
Of course, yes. It's taken into account by staff when we review the projects. It's taken into account by Historic Preservation Commission. The ordinance in Glendale, as written, does not have an age limit or a minimum age requirement for a resource. Nationwide, there are varying ideas of how old something needs to be. Sometimes it's 50 years old. More typically, it's 30 or 25 years old. Los Angeles, Glendale, many other local cities don't have an age limit. There's a sense that because we go through the vetting process, I look at it, the department looks at it, you look at it, we're able to kind of assess whether it's significant. One thing you should know about this house, it will only be if you do designate it, it will only be the second youngest property in Glendale. So the tea house in Brand Park is actually built the year after this was built.
I have a question on the same lines before we get into this house. Do you know offhand when the John Lautner, Bob's Big Boy, was demolished? What year?
On Colorado?
Well, we have the one on La Cañada. I don't know, actually. The Bob's Big Boy headquarters is still there.
Or the one the John Lautner, the one that had the big awning. The one
Yeah,
that's
that I
shown.
don't know. So.
Would you say probably in the 70s?
It's possible, 70s or 80s.
So when was it built? In the 50s?
If it was Lautner, it was probably mid-50s.
So that means that it was about 30 years old when it was demolished. Would that have made it any less of an important resource whether it had been demolished 30 years after or 50 years after?
No, I think for a building by an architect.
Had that building been landmarked when it was 30 years old, we would have had arguably a very significant historic resource in existence instead of demolished.
Right.
Okay, just wanted to make that point.
Good point. I'm just saying, using the word historic for something that's
maybe
that young just seems inappropriate.
Mr. Draymond.
I was going to say, maybe at some point, perhaps Mr. Hagani or someone in his department might want to go over with the council and for the public's benefit again all of the various categories of and criteria that lend a property to being considered historic. Because some of it is not just the age of the property, of course. It could be a younger property where someone of great significance lived or worked, or which would have nothing really to do necessarily with the nature of the structure itself, but the significance of who lived there. That could be considered historic.
Yes, we can do that.
Although the general public probably doesn't, but I just had to rub it in a little. Sorry to...
No, and it's interesting that you bring it up because the Historic Preservation Commission is meeting on Monday. We have an item on the agenda at one of the commissioners' requests to discuss the issue of potential minimum age requirements. So we'll be hearing that, and we can bring that back to you if you'd like.
What about historic councilmen? When do we start to designate a councilman historic? Oh, no. Sorry. Okay, can we see your...
We can look at the presentation if you'd like.
We can have the lights.
I don't want to be acting there.
Here we have this relatively young, relatively fresh, but still 35-year-old property, 1758 Roar Street. It's in the Rockmont neighborhood up on the slopes. It has a tremendous view over Glendale and looking out to downtown Los Angeles over the San Fernando Valley. And I think you can see in looking at this, this isn't a kind of a run-of-the-mill modern house. By modern architecture standards, we're looking at something that's fairly unique. And when the Preservation Commission looked at this, that was one of the things they were particularly struck by. It was designed by a local architect, Varam Jabijian, also known as Jim Jabijian, who was an early DRB member and did some other projects around town. And what's interesting about this house is that it is still lived in by the person who commissioned it. So Richard Block continues to be the owner. It truly reflects part of his desire when he was building the house in the 70s. And you had mentioned the Mills Act for the tax reduction. Because he's owned the house since 1973 when it was built, he wouldn't gain any benefit from the tax program, so he hasn't applied for the Mills Act. Going back, just, we're looking at a house that's all about the walls. It's all about the expanses of glass. It's all about the views you get from inside. But then when you look at it from outside, it's all about the geometry of the construction and the breaking up of the box into component parts. Here's a view of the entryway, which is kind of away from the street. The area above that is a walkway that actually extends to a deck over the garage you can see in the lower photograph. And then there's a second deck that kind of faces out toward the street, so it opens up the living room space toward the views, and you do sort of feel like you're hovering in space when you're in this home. It was featured on 2 Glendale Historical Society tours. It's also been featured on a tour that was held by the Society of Architectural Historians, Southern California chapter. So it's fairly well recognized within the community of people looking at the architecture of Glendale that this is a significant resource. The Preservation Commission agreed at their hearing. They thought it met the architecture criterion D, as one of the best modern resources in its neighborhood, and also as one that contains outstanding design and detail elements reflecting the modern style.
Question, were those vinyl windows?
There are some vinyl windows on the house. It is a modern resource. Only the ones on the left side.
The next one.
The next one has some.
They are replacement windows.
Those are not vinyl windows.
Oh.
But these, only the ones that are kind of up against the hillside.
After this.
After this one? Those are, yeah. They're replacement windows for, there were jalousie louvered windows that he replaced. We specifically brought that up with the Preservation Commission. They're well aware of some of the issues we've been going over with vinyl windows. And they thought, given the architectural quality of the house and the fact that these were on plain stucco surfaces, that it didn't detract too much from the house.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I have some questions. And remind me, Mr. Platt, what does receiving a historical resource certification imply for this owner and future owners?
Because he's not applying for the tax reduction, it basically means that it'll be listed on the Glendale Register when he applies to do work. So any work that requires a permit will have to be reviewed by planning staff, by me as preservation planner, and then possibly by the Historic Preservation Commission. So responsibility for design review shifts from DRB to HPC.
It doesn't mean he can't do any modifications.
Just like any historic house, we can do additions, we can make changes. He could have applied to put vinyl windows in, and we would have considered that. But
okay.
Mr. Starber, did you have a question?
Oh, it was more of a planning question. I was curious of if this design were to come in today on a hillside property, we were to evaluate it. I assume we're not saying this is a model for other hillside development?
I'm not going to go there.
Smart.
Well, it seems to me it's an interesting question.
Well,
Hassan doesn't want to go there either, apparently.
I think
Better he than I.
I think that's probably part of a much longer discussion that we should have at some point.
Yes.
And it's something that I've spoken to Mr. Hagani about and that the design review boards have talked about, as whether sometimes our codes, in an attempt to mitigate or reduce the impact of development on the hillsides, sometimes also restricts creativity and the freedom of architects to create interesting structures. So I think that that's a good point, but a discussion for another day. I would just like to say a few things about this house. I'm proud to have been the person who put this house on its first architectural tour as a board member for the Society of Architectural Historians, and living down the road from this house. I would walk past it on almost a daily basis and always admired it, and knocked on the door, and the owner, Mr. Block, was thrilled to have the house recognized and very, very happy and accommodating to allow a bunch of strangers to walk through his house, not just for the one tour, but now on 3 separate architectural tours. He's extremely generous with this resource, always has it open to the public upon request, and now is listing it on the Historic Register for no financial gains for himself, but just because he thinks that the house is beautiful and wants to see it preserved over the years, which I think is the right reason to list a house and a very selfless gesture on his part. And I'm thrilled to see this house come before us. It's the kind of architecture that I really love, and I think it's a beautiful house. And I will say also that the interior is even more spectacular than the outside. And when you're inside this giant glass cube, you really do feel like you're just hanging off the side of the hill. And I'm sorry that Mr. Block is not here. I don't see him in the audience.
Yeah, he couldn't come tonight. So.
Are there any other questions?
Well, you want to close the public hearing?
We do need to.
I will close the public hearing.
We do need to, at some point, address the issue raised by Mr. Starbird and then followed up by you, because I could see a disgruntled architect very upset, pointing to a historic certified home and presumably, potentially, a duplicate, a copy, which would get a thumbs down. And at some point, I think in a proper forum with the Planning Commission, Planning Department and Mr. Platt, we could maybe get some guidance, because I don't think we want to go down the wrong path.
I agree, and I remember being part of a Hillside Design Guidelines study session where the same recommendation was made, and they wanted to bring that conversation to council. So I would be very happy to be the second voice to say that it would be great if planning could put together some kind of a report and we agendize further discussion of maybe refinement of the Hillside Design Guidelines. Okay? So do I have any motion in regards to this?
9A1.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero? Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman?
Yes. Thank you. And we have another.
Yes. At 9B is Director of Planning regarding Glendale Register of Historic Resources listing and Mills Act contract for the property at 1020 Hillcroft Road. B1 is a resolution designating the property as a historic resource and authorizing Mills Act contract.
At 1020 Hillcroft Road, we have a really old house.
Looks
Okay, we'll open the public hearing.
historic.
Also a hillside home up in the Ross Moines neighborhood on the south side of Hillcroft.
There you go.
And what we discovered, when I first saw this house and then bringing it through the HPC process, was that even though this is an older house and it reads as a historic house and it's in the Tudor Revival style that was one of the popular styles in Glendale in the 20s and 30s, this house was built in 1931, the Commission was really struck by how unique looking this house is. It really is something that we haven't seen much, in that if you look at this roof structure, it's really a big A-frame kind of house with this huge roof on both sides facing the street and then facing out toward the hill. And when you zoom in on kind of the entryway, that's where all of the architectural detail really kicks in these kind of notches that were cut out of this wedge-shaped form. And this is where we see a lot of the classic character-defining features of the Tudor Revival style. It was designed by an architect named Radcliffe Hollingsworth. We only know of one other building that he designed, which is a fairly interesting one off of Wilshire. But I think we're dealing with an architect who really knew his period style and knew how to work in this Tudor concept with the brickwork, the various window styles, this great entry door. Here are a few other details, very interesting chimney with the stonework that kind of runs up from the ground and then turns into the brick chimney rising over the roof line. What's interesting about this property was the owner owns a couple of classic cars, and when this went to HPC, this canopy was extending over the driveway, and the Preservation Commission loved the house but did not so much love the awning. So they asked the owner to remove this, which has been done. They wanted it to be done before it was brought to council. And everyone's very happy, including the owners, who have a lot more light coming into their living room, who think the house looks much better. And this is an example of how going through the process can really quickly bring some changes that really enhance the streetscape. So the HPC found that this met both parts of Criterion D also, that it's one of the best Tudor Revival houses in the Ross Moines area, and that it also has great details and elements of the style.
And I'm assuming that steep roof pitch is to allow the ice to
Exactly.
come off a little bit more easily.
And a nice moss to grow on it. So, yeah.
And I have no cards for this house. Does
I
anybody
was going
have
to say
any
the
questions?
last time it snowed Glendale was 1949. I know because school got let out.
Mr. Najarian.
Question, Mr. Platt. The roof is clearly a great asset to this house. It's a wood shake roof. What do they do, this homeowner and others, with original wood shake roofs who have been deemed historic or mills when they have to either repair or re-roof? Can they go back to the... I mean, there's fire codes that trump...
This is in the hillside area, so there's no way that they could replace this with a wood shake roof.
So they'd have to
use a substitute material. We've heard about some wood shakes that are impregnated with a fireproof material. I haven't seen those, so I don't know if that would actually meet fire code. Something we'd consider, but we definitely look at alternate materials that kind of keep the look without...
So your staff is involved in re-roofing?
Yeah, for design review.
Sort of roof issue.
And then fire department staff would review it for safety.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Just a comment. While we are asking Mr. Ghani's department to bring back that report, let's make sure that it doesn't focus just on Hillside, because the question that was raised by the city manager and then by two council members, you could ask of this house as well. This is not a modern house, but would this be approved if it was being suggested for, let's say, 3rd Avenue in the Highway Highlands? The answer is probably no. So, you could ask that of almost every historic property that has come before this council. It would depend on the setting, the location, the neighborhood, the architectural style, and many other elements as to whether or not it would be approved today. I mean, if it were coming forward today as a new design. So let's not limit it just to hillsides.
Good point. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Public hearing closed.
Public hearing is closed.
Move 9B1.
Second.
We have a roll call.
Council members Raymond,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero, Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman.
Yes. What's the next item on the agenda?
Next item is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision, and the city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
Thank you. I have 2 cards. If anybody else wishes to speak for oral communications, please bring up your cards. First, we have Victor Jones.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I see today we've had quite a love fest about the fire, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. My name is Victor Jones. I've lived in Glendale for 30 years, and for the rest of my life here in the immediate area, Highland Park, and therefore. I've been in the Glen Oaks Canyon area since 1984. And every year from July to November, I keep an open eye and watching my neighborhood. I feel like the folks in Florida that waiting for the hurricane to come in, because half of Glendale, as you know, is in a high fire danger area. Within my following comments, I'll express some ideas I have to curtail some of the problems that I've seen. As a young boy, I lived in Highland Park on North Avenue 57. The fire department would come by every early summer and do a controlled burn very effectively around the surrounding hills. Last month, by accident, there was a semi-burn controlled right around Freeway 134 and Glen Oaks, 200 yards wide by 300 yards long. Now, I see it that many of the homes are protected from another brush fire in the Glen Oaks area. I also noticed 2 new fire breaks that face the 134 freeway. We need more of these around Glendale, made by tractors or fire burn controlled by our fire department. But fire breaks need to be much wider than the ones we've seen there on the 134 freeway. I think they need to be as wide as the Brand Boulevard. The station fire has raged on for over 2 weeks and burned over 165,000 acres. People say the firefighters were very brave and super professional. Of course, I totally agree. During the fire, we heard words like controlled burn, back burn, especially when the fire got near Acton and Mount Wilson and La Cañada. These techniques were very effective to save homes and lives and structure. Therefore, we must conclude, why not use these techniques when there aren't any fires around here and do the controlled burns in the late spring? Don't let the AQMD dictate to you how to run your city. The open brush areas in Glendale are going to burn someday anyway, so why not control the burn on our own terms? This will cost less money and be safer than just fighting a fire when they happen. Or why let some pyromaniac walk up and through an ungated, unfenced area start a fire and able to take off down a freeway? Every year I get letters from the county to clear the brush off my vacant lots, which I do comply. The Glendale Fire Department comes by my home every year to see that I've cleared off my lot by 100 feet. I do it to 300 feet. I noticed that the Glendale Unified School District owns a piece of property next to mine. Last year they cleared it to 300 feet. My question is the City of Glendale as diligent as the GUSD? The State of California owns the freeways, the 134, the 210, and the 2. Years ago, about 14, as you probably remember, the fire jumped the 2 freeway near Mountain Street and helped destroy many homes and structures. What are we going to do about the brush that still exists along the 2 freeway near Mountain? Why not call Caltrans in Altadena and have them clear off this areas near the freeway? Anyone can throw a lit cigarette out the window that will ignite a brush fire. It has come to my attention through an unnamed source, and it was also reported on TV that a lot of men and machinery were used too long fighting the Palos Verdes fight and not in La Cañada. That may be some of the reasons why the station fire got out of control. I feel we need better TV coverage on these fires. Now, last year, when I was in southeast Texas while visiting our apartments near Highway 59 and 71, Hurricane Ike was coming down the coast. They had that area 10 days before the hurricane came ashore, 24 hours of coverage on 3 channels. Lucky for us, Ike changed direction, went further east, and slammed into Galveston. The fire department is coming to the Glen Oaks Canyon Homeowners Association tomorrow night, Wednesday. I hope, and I'm sure they'll do a show and tell, and they'll tell us how they can prevent the home and brush fires. This is a year of high technology and many techniques they use to help us control the burns. I think we need to talk more about backfire and fire breaks. Like Smokey the Bear tells us, only you can stop and prevent forest fires. And I think we need more controlled burns and help the citizens of Glendale protect their homes. Thanks. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We make our comments, if there are any, at the end of the oral communication session. Thank you very much. Margaret Hammond.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and the councilman and staff and audience. Well, empty seats. Anyway, my name is Margaret Hammond, and I'm here again to talk about the fact that I do feel very strongly that we need to reinforce our police department and not deplete it. The police department has been depleted in the last 2 years by attrition, by whatever, as it goes on and on. And at this time, there are 3 more that are in jeopardy, 3 more police positions. And my feeling is this. They say, well, it has to be cuts across the board of all the departments. I don't care about the rest of the departments. I don't care about them at all. Do whatever you want with them, but do not cut the police department. They are our guardian angels. And when I pick up my phone and I call, which I have done, about people on the vacant lot across the street congregating, I don't know what they are, drinking or doing whatever, that police department comes within 5 minutes. I'm out there working away on my lawn, I see these guys over there, and I'm like, uh-oh, and I call, and immediately they come. I need that. I live alone, and there are several other women in our area that live alone. There used to be more. We used to be called Widow's Hill. But I'm the only one left of the 7 widows now. And so we need our police department. We need them to be kept up. I understand that it's 1.25 for Glendale, 1.85 for Pasadena, and 2.25 for LA per thousand. We need to have our police kept up. We don't need any more cuts. And I know I've heard all the figures and the numbers and whatnot. I don't care. I believe we have to maintain our police force. There are other departments. What do I care who answers the phone in some department or who reads the meters? So what? The meters get read a day later or 2 days later. I need the police department when I need them. And the other thing is, we keep allowing buildings on and on and on, particularly in my area. There are 2 new apartments going in or whatever on Palmer. We are bumper to bumper now. I mean, it's impossible to park. You couldn't park anything on the street at times between cars. And we keep allowing more building in the area. It's absolutely idiotic. And I don't know when you're ever going to stop it, and you keep going ahead and doing it. And of course, there are a lot of illegal rentals in our area. I bought my home as an R1 4, and if I wanted to live in apartments, I go live in my apartments on Louise Street. Right now, I have people next door that have illegally taken a pool room and made it into a kitchen, illegally put a bedroom over top of the garage, all without permits, and have also added an apartment underneath a deck that was built. A deck that was supposed to be an open deck. I have an open deck. I don't have an apartment under the deck. They do, with a bathroom. So that adds to the problems of our parking. When you've got 6 cars in one house, it's unbelievable. It should not be allowed, and it's disgusting. That's not the only one. There's several, and it is really a hardship for the people in the area, and becomes, as I've said before, a matter of animosity between neighbors. Whether you park in the street, you got to park here, whatever. It's really sad, and it's all caused by overbuilding. And that was what we fought years ago. In 1979, 80, Adams Hill Homeowners Group was formed to fight the apartments being built in our area. And I hope the Adams Hill people remember that. There's discussion on redoing our homeowners group. The homeowners that formed that group were fighting for their neighborhood. And Ginger Bremberg was one of the ones that helped us when she came on city council and got our area R1. That we would have all been, unfortunately, that whole area would have been rezoned. But thank God she helped us on that. So I do a big vote of thanks to her, wherever she is now, dear Ginger. And I'm saying we all need to stand up for our areas of what we think is right. And in mine, the quality of life is being destroyed by allowing overbuilding, therefore having overparking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. That's the last card that I have. Do we have any do we have any council comments? Mr. Najarian.
First off, to the gentleman who talked about what he thought was a planned backfire at the 134 in Glen Oaks, I believe that was the It was an arson fire, was it not?
I don't recall its source, but it certainly wasn't a planned fire. No.
The other thing is with regard to Margaret. I hear what you're saying about the police, about that being the very most important department. But as you continued to talk to us about the things that you also found important, you touched on issues that the planning department needs to deal with, that Public Works and the building department need to deal with, that neighborhood services need to deal with. So I agree the police are very important to us, but so are all these other departments that contribute to our quality of life in town. So it's, I wish we had double the neighborhood services force that could answer your call and find out where these illegal units are, and that the Public Works Department could make sure that the buildings and structures are inspected right on time, and that Planning Department could work with us on these zoning issues. Everything comes together. There's no department that's not important towards making this a great city. But I do appreciate your comments on the police.
The only comment that I'll make is for Mr. Jones. I appreciate your coming in with those comments. I will ask the fire department to review your comments and to let us know if there's anything that we can do in terms of controlled burns, if it's a good idea, not a good idea, what their thoughts are, and also in terms of the fire breaks. Because I think we all would love to find ways of making our city safer from fire. Thank you for coming in. Are there any other comments? Okay. Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.